Story 1. The Locked Basement. Last semester, when I first moved into the dorms at Ridgewood University, I didn't think the place was anything more than an old brick building with thin walls and noisy plumbing. I was just another sophomore transfer student trying to survive a new campus, a new roommate, and a new life that I wasn't even sure I wanted. My dorm room, 312B, wasn't special. The carpet smelled faintly of old ramen, and the scratched metal bed frames clanged whenever someone shifted their weight. But it was the cheapest option available, so I took it. My roommate, Hannah, didn't arrive until a week later. So, for the first few nights, I was alone in that slightly crooked rectangular room with the flickering ceiling light that buzzed like a trapped fly. It was on my fourth night alone that I found the journal. I dropped my phone, and it slid under the bed frame. When I reached under to grab it, my hand brushed against something cold and smooth, like the cover of a leather-bound book. I pulled it out. It was a small, dark brown journal with a torn strap and no name on the front. It looked old, but not old, just used, like whoever owned it carried it everywhere. At first I thought it belonged to whoever lived in the room before me, but the RA had told me the previous resident moved out suddenly last spring. And when I asked why, she just shrugged and mumbled something about personal reasons. The journal wasn't locked, and I know it's wrong, but curiosity felt heavier than guilt, so I opened it. The first page was dated from last year. The girl's handwriting, because I could tell instantly from the curly loops and neat margins, was small and nervous. It said, "There's something wrong with this room." I actually laughed, thinking someone was being dramatic. But as I kept reading, the entries got progressively stranger. She wrote about nightmares so vivid she woke up with her throat hoarse from screaming, about the ceiling creaking at night even though no one lived above her, and about feeling watched from the space under the bed. The more I read, the more my chest tightened. It was like the words were tugging at something I didn't realize was already frayed inside me. I closed the journal after about 20 pages. I told myself the girl probably had anxiety or insomnia. Nothing supernatural. Nothing real. The next night I left the journal on my desk and went to sleep. Around 3:12 a.m. I woke up to a soft tapping, 3 taps, a pause, then 2 more. At first I thought it was coming from the door or the wall. But when I sat up and listened closer, I realized the tapping was coming from directly under my mattress, like someone was tapping the wooden slats beneath me. I froze. The sound was faint but rhythmic. Tap, 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 tap. My mind raced through explanations. Maybe the bed frame was loose, maybe a mouse was under there. But the pattern felt deliberate, like a message. When the tapping finally stopped, I couldn't fall asleep again. The next morning, I looked under the bed. Nothing but dust and the metal frame. But the journal was no longer on my desk. It was under the bed again, right in the same spot where I'd touched it the first time. I didn't move it. No one else had been in the room, but I brushed it off. Stress, I told myself. New environment, new room, weird dreams. I threw the journal into my backpack so I wouldn't have to look at it anymore and went to class. But that night, I had a dream so real, I woke up with my face wet from tears. In the dream, I was lying in my bed, unable to move, while a pale hand slowly crawled out from under the frame, not reaching for me, just feeling around, like it was searching for something. I woke up, gasping. And when I checked the time, it was 3:12 a.m. again. I didn't look under the bed. I couldn't, but I felt something was wrong. The room felt heavier, the air denser. I kept hearing soft noises at the edges of my sleep, rustling, breathing, tapping. 2 days later, Hannah arrived. She was bubbly, loud, blonde, and the complete opposite of everything I was. Her energy filled every corner of the room instantly, and for a brief moment, I thought the darkness I'd felt shrinking at the edges. When she saw the journal on my bedside table, she picked it up. "Oh, cute. You journaling?" she asked. "No," I said too quickly, snatching it from her. "It's just something I found." She raised an eyebrow, but shrugged it off. For a week, things were fine. The tapping stopped. The dreams faded. Classes got busy, and I almost convinced myself the whole thing was just my brain messing with me. But then one night Hannah shook me awake. "Why were you talking in your sleep?" she whispered. I groggily asked what she meant. "You kept repeating something," she said. "Don't open it. Don't open it." I felt cold. "Open what?" I asked, even though I already knew what she'd say. "The journal." After she fell asleep again, I stared at that journal for a long time. I didn't remember the dream, or talking, or even waking up. But something about the way Hannah looked at me like she was scared to say more made me feel like the journal was burrowing deeper into me. That night, I decided I'd throw it away. I walked to the dumpster behind the dorm with it wrapped in a hoodie. I tossed it in, turned around, and didn't look back. But the next morning, it was sitting on my pillow. I screamed. Hannah jolted awake. "Jesus, what happened?" she asked. I held up the journal with shaking hands. "I threw this out. I threw it out last night." She frowned, looked at it, then at me. "Are you sure you didn't just forget?" But I knew. I knew I wasn't losing my mind. Not yet. Something in this room wanted me to keep it. I flipped the journal open to the last page I remembered reading. There were new lines written in darker ink. The handwriting was shakier, like the writer's hand was trembling. It said, "It's awake now." I slammed the journal shut. This time I didn't scream. I couldn't. My throat was tight, and my palms were sweating. Over the next few days, I started hearing the tapping again. It always happened after 3 a.m. Always under the bed. Always rhythmic. Hannah slept through it somehow, or maybe whatever it was just didn't want her to hear. And I began having dreams, awful, vivid dreams, where something crawled slowly from under my bed, whispering in a voice that sounded too much like mine. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus, couldn't think. My anxiety spiraled, and the more I tried to stay awake, the more the room warped around the corners of my vision. On the 10th night, I felt my mattress move. Just slightly, like someone had brushed their fingers against the underside of it. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The journal slid off my nightstand by itself, hitting the floor with a soft thud. Hannah stirred but didn't wake. The journal flipped open. Pages fluttered as though caught by wind, except the windows were closed. The pages stopped on a blank one. And right in front of my eyes, words began appearing on the page, written in the same shaky handwriting. "Let me out." My heart hammered so hard I thought it would burst. I wanted to run but couldn't move. The mattress dipped again. Something was pushing up from underneath. The words on the page darkened. "Let me out." I grabbed the journal with shaking hands and threw it across the room. It hit the wall and fell open. The lights flickered. The bed creaked. And then, silence, until a whisper came from under the bed. A whisper that sounded like it was inches from my ear. "If you won't let me out, I'll let you in." Everything went black. When I woke up, the sun was rising. Hannah was already gone for class. My head pounded, and my limbs felt heavy. I had no idea how long I'd been unconscious. The journal was on my chest, and there was a new entry written in handwriting that looked frighteningly like mine. It said, "Tonight." That entire day felt wrong. People avoided making eye contact with me. I caught my own reflection in a window, and for a split second, swore my reflection smiled a fraction later than I did. And when I stood in line at the dining hall, a girl behind me said, "Hey, Didn't you live in 312B last year? I froze. No, I said. First year here. She looked confused. Really? I swear I saw you in the hall last semester. You asked me if I heard the tapping too. I walked away without answering. That night I didn't want to sleep. I didn't want to be in the room at all. I told Hannah I was studying in the lounge and stayed there as long as I could. Around 2:45 a.m., the RA told me I needed to head back because they were closing the floor for nightly rounds. I begged her to let me stay. She said I looked pale and offered to walk me back, but when we reached my door, she stopped, her eyes fixed on the metal numbers. 312B, she whispered. I hated this room when I lived here. My stomach dropped. You lived here? She nodded. But I moved out after a month. Too many bad dreams. And the tapping. I wanted to scream, cry, or run, but she patted my shoulder, said good night, and walked away. I stood in front of the door for 10 minutes before going in. Hannah was asleep. The room was quiet. Too quiet. I sat on my bed and stared at the journal on my pillow. I didn't touch it, but it didn't matter. The words began writing themselves again. You're late. My breath caught. The mattress moved. A hand, pale, thin, trembling, slipped out from under the bed. Then another. They gripped the edges of the frame. Something began pulling itself out, inch by slow inch. But it wasn't a creature. It wasn't a ghost. It was me. Or a version of me. A twisted, hollow-eyed, sunken version, with ink-stained fingers and a smile that looked carved rather than formed. She crawled up the side of the bed and whispered, I told you, if you won't let me out, I'll let you in. And before I could scream, she grabbed my wrist and pulled. I fell, not onto the floor, not under the bed, into the dark, cold, endless, suffocating darkness that felt like drowning in ink. I don't remember climbing out, but now I'm back, sitting on the bed, writing in the journal, waiting for Hannah to wake up, because I'm not me anymore. I don't know where the real me is. Maybe still trapped under the bed, scratching at the wooden slats, hoping someone will let her out. And I don't know how much longer I can pretend. But tonight at 3:12 a.m., I think I'll introduce myself to Hannah. After all, she should know who she's really been living with. And then maybe she'll join me. Under the bed. Forever. Hannah didn't notice the change right away. Of course she didn't. Nobody ever does at first. For the first 24 hours, I copied everything perfectly. Her roommate's smile, her quiet laugh, the little way I used to tuck my hair behind my ear. I'd practiced for months, trapped in the dark beneath the bed, watching her every habit like a patient shadow. But being in me wasn't as easy as I thought it'd be. There were leftovers, thoughts that weren't mine, memories that tasted sour, fears that sat heavy under my ribs. Whenever I blinked too long, I saw glimpses of her pressed somewhere deep below the floorboards, her hands dragging against darkness, her mouth moving but making no sound. The first night in my new skin, I sat perfectly still on the bed, staring at Hannah as she slept. I waited for the tapping, just to see if it still came. But it didn't. It didn't need to anymore. Around 3:12 a.m., the air tensed, thick and hot, like the room was holding its breath. Then I heard a faint scratch, not from under the bed, but from inside my head. A long, slow drag of fingernails across wood. Let me out. Her voice, the real girl's voice. Weak, far away. I pressed my palms against my temples until it stopped. In the morning, Hannah wrinkled her nose at me like something felt off. Did you sleep? She asked. I smiled the old smile I practiced. Yeah. Why? You look Tired. Really tired. She hesitated. And you keep staring. Like you're waiting for something. I forced myself to blink more, to breathe slower. Because she was right, I was waiting for something. The journal. But it was gone. I tore the room apart when she left for class, checked under the bed, behind the radiator, inside the pillowcases, between the mattress and the slats. Nothing. A cold panic spread through my chest because without the journal, I couldn't hear it properly, couldn't feel the pull. The journal was the tether, the mouthpiece, the doorway. And if it wasn't here, then someone had taken it. That night, Hannah returned early and dumped her bag on her bed. "Random question," she said. "Did you mess with my backpack?" My breath stopped. "Why?" "Because," she said slowly, "there was this old notebook inside. It wasn't mine. And it had your handwriting in it, which I don't know how. Did you put it there?" I had to force my face not to twist. She had it. She touched it. She read it. "Where is it?" I asked, too quickly. She flinched a little. "In my desk." "Why?" Something inside my skull, something deep and buried, banged once, hard enough to make my vision blur. "Let me out. Don't let her keep it. Get it back." I swallowed. "Can I see it?" Hannah looked at me strangely. "Why are you acting weird? It's just a notebook." Just a notebook. She had no idea. I didn't move while she dug it out of her desk. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from something else. Anticipation. Hunger. Like I was about to reconnect with a missing limb. She placed the journal on her bed, and the moment it touched the blanket, the overhead light flickered. Hannah jumped. "Okay, that's not funny." The journal opened by itself. Pages fluttered violently, stopping on a page in the center. Fresh ink bled across the paper, like it was being written from the inside out. Hannah stared, her mouth falling open. "What the hell?" I stepped closer. Her eyes snapped toward me, not scared of the moving journal, but scared of my face. "Your expression," she whispered. "What is wrong with you?" I didn't answer. The words were still appearing in dark, pulsing strokes. "She's not me." Hannah backed away. "Okay. Seriously, what is going on?" My lips moved before I could stop them. "She wants out." Hannah froze. "Who?" The light flickered again, buzzing violently. I lifted the journal, and as soon as my fingers touched the cover, I felt her scream inside me. A deafening, silent scream, one only I could hear. The real girl. Clawing, thrashing, fighting. Inside the dark, I staggered, gripping the bed frame. Hannah reached toward me, panic rising in her voice. Hey, are you okay?" I looked up at her, and for the first time since I wore this skin, I didn't bother hiding the smile. The real smile, the carved one, the one I practiced in the dark for months. "No," I whispered, "but you will be." The lights exploded into darkness. Hannah screamed, and the last thing I heard before everything snapped into silence was the tapping, not from under the bed, but from inside the walls, and it wasn't asking to be let out anymore. It was inviting her in. Story 2. The Whispering Dorm. Ivy had just moved into the old dormitory of her university in the Midwest, the building's peeling paint, dim fluorescent lights, and creaking wooden floors giving off a strange combination of nostalgia and unease. She carried a small suitcase and a mixture of excitement and anxiety, laughing nervously at the upperclassmen's vague warnings about things you don't ask about in the dorm. That first night, as she opened the door to her assigned room, a sudden chill brushed against her neck, making her hair stand on end. The room, seemingly ordinary, felt oppressive, and the faint smell of mildew and old wood seemed to seep into her skin. She tried to calm herself, blaming the draft from the broken window, but when she sat at her desk and glanced into the mirror on the wall, her reflection appeared slightly off, subtly distorted. In a blink, she thought she saw another girl standing behind her, motionless, with hollow eyes, but when she spun around, the room was empty. Heart-pounding, she told herself it was just exhaustion, yet the feeling of being watched never left her. The next day, wandering down the narrow, dimly lit hallway toward the cafeteria, Ivy heard soft footsteps echoing behind her, yet when she turned, no one was there. Curious, she asked her roommate and a few other students about the dorm, and that's when she first heard about the locked basement. It had been sealed for decades, and rumors circulated of students who had disappeared, never leaving a trace. Most dismissed these stories as urban legends, but the glint of fear in the older students' eyes warned Ivy otherwise. They all told her, with varying degrees of urgency, not to go down there. But Ivy's curiosity gnawed at her relentlessly. That night, when the dorm was silent and the other students asleep, she noticed a forgotten key on the floor near the janitor's closet. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. The lock of the basement door yielded with a soft click, releasing a musty wave of air that smelled of mold and damp earth. Ivy shined her flashlight down the narrow staircase, its weak beam cutting through the darkness, revealing cracked concrete steps and shadows that seemed to stretch unnaturally. She descended slowly, each footstep echoing like a drumbeat in her ears, her mind racing with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The basement was vast, but not empty. It held rows of old storage lockers, piles of forgotten furniture, and strange symbols etched into the walls in what looked like dried blood. A whisper of movement brushed against her senses, though the air was still. Ivy's breath quickened, and a creeping feeling told her she wasn't alone. Halfway through the basement, she glimpsed figures just at the edge of her flashlight's beam shapes that seemed human but moved with unnatural stiffness. As she stepped closer, they froze, vanishing whenever she tried to focus. Ivy's heart raced uncontrollably, the sound of her own breathing echoing in the cavernous space. Somewhere in the darkness, a low, almost inaudible chant began, rising and falling like a tide, compelling and terrifying at once. Panic clawed at her chest, yet something kept her rooted, drawn toward a door at the far end of the basement, its surface covered in ancient scratches. With a trembling hand, she pushed it open, revealing a smaller room, lit by a sickly green glow. Inside, a group of students she had never seen before were seated in a circle, their faces pale and blank, eyes void of emotion. They whispered in unison, words Ivy could not understand, and when she stepped closer, one turned toward her with a smile that made her stomach twist. "You weren't supposed to find us," the girl's voice echoed inside Ivy's skull, though no sound had passed her lips. The circle began to shift, the chanting intensifying, and Ivy felt herself being pulled into their rhythm, the air growing heavy, oppressive, almost alive. She tried to retreat, but the basement seemed to stretch endlessly, walls warping, stairs dissolving into darkness. Ivy's own reflection appeared on the walls, twisted, smiling, whispering secrets she could not hear but somehow understood. Fear and fascination battled inside her, and for the first time, she realized the dormitory itself was alive, feeding off the curiosity and fear of its inhabitants, and the basement was its heart, keeping its dark secrets hidden for generations. Ivy's scream echoed through the empty corridors above, but the dorm remained still, the fluorescent lights flickering, indifferent. The circle in the basement continued their chant, and somewhere deep inside, Ivy felt a part of herself slip away, consumed by the place that promised safety and normality, but delivered something far older, far hungrier, and far more terrifying than she could have ever imagined. Ivy stumbled backward, the door to the glowing room slamming shut behind her with a force that rattled her teeth. Panic surged, but her legs felt like lead, her mind trapped in a haze of fear and fascination. The circle of pale-faced students began to rise as one, moving toward her with a slow, unnatural grace. Their eyes were hollow, yet they seemed to see her every thought, every hesitation. Ivy backed away, her flashlight trembling, casting long, distorted shadows across the walls. The chanting grew louder, echoing not just in the basement, but in her chest, vibrating through her bones. Each step she took seemed to warp the floor beneath her, the concrete twisting into dark tendrils that reached for her ankles, trying to pull her down. A whisper brushed her ear. "Stay. Don't leave." She spun around, but no one was there. Yet the voice continued, echoing from every corner of the basement, soft yet insistent, threading into her mind. Ivy realized, with a chill that ran down her spine, that this was not just a room or a circle of students. The dorm itself was alive, feeding off fear, curiosity, and secrets. The walls pulsed subtly, like a heartbeat, and she could feel the air thickening around her. Desperate, she ran toward the stairs, but each step seemed to stretch infinitely, the basement expanding beyond the limits of reason. Her flashlight flickered and died, plunging her into near-complete darkness. Ivy could hear the whispers now, rising into frantic murmurs, calling her name, telling her things she could not comprehend but instinctively feared. Panic threatened to overwhelm her, yet a strange, magnetic pull forced her to move deeper, toward the center of the basement where the air felt heaviest. There, in the dim green glow that seemed to radiate from the walls themselves, she saw something that made her blood freeze. Dozens of lockers, each slightly ajar, and inside were objects she recognized, personal belongings of students from years past. Shoes, books, clothes, some even with photographs of faces staring back at her, eyes wide in terror. Ivy realized that these were not just rumors of disappearances. These students had been claimed, stored, and forgotten, consumed by the dorm's hunger. Suddenly, one locker creaked open violently. Ivy stumbled backward as a hand shot out, pale and skeletal, grasping at her ankle. She screamed, yanking free, and ran blindly through the twisting corridors, the whispers now shouting in dissonant cacophony. Her own reflection appeared on the walls again, twisted, screaming, reaching toward her. Yet Ivy could feel a part of herself, the Ivy that had been curious and brave, dissolving with every heartbeat. She tripped and fell in front of a narrow tunnel she had not noticed before. Crawling through, she emerged into a section of the basement that looked oddly normal, almost welcoming, with familiar dormitory furniture and faint light filtering through dusty windows. Relief washed over her, but it was fleeting. A shadow moved behind one of the beds, coalescing into the shape of a girl she vaguely recognized, a former student she had seen on campus photos, smiling, oblivious. The girl's lips curled into a smile that was not friendly, but predatory. Ivy's stomach churned as she understood. These figures, these students, were echoes, trapped souls feeding the dorm's life force. The girl spoke without moving her mouth. "You don't belong, yet you came." Ivy ran again, now screaming with a raw, primal fear. But the basement twisted around her, turning hallways into loops, doors into walls, and shadows into entities that reached out for her. Every scream echoed back, distorted, layered with the whispers of every student lost before her. Hours, or maybe minutes, she could not tell passed as Ivy navigated the impossible labyrinth. Eventually, she found a set of stairs leading upward, faint light from the dorm above spilling down. With one final surge, she ran, her legs shaking, arms clawing at the railing. She burst through the basement door into the hallway of the dormitory, gasping, drenched in sweat, her mind reeling. The hallway was silent. Lights flickered. It all looked normal, almost mundane. Ivy leaned against the wall, trembling, realizing she had escaped, for now. But the dorm did not forgive curiosity easily. Over the next days, Ivy noticed subtle, almost imperceptible changes. Her reflection in mirrors would linger a moment too long. Shadows at the edges of her vision would mimic her movements, even when no one was there. Whispers threading through the hum of the fluorescent lights at night. Ivy's roommates began acting oddly, avoiding her gaze, speaking in hushed tones, sometimes disappearing for hours with no explanation. Every time she walked past the basement door, she felt the same pull, the same hunger emanating from the locked space below. One night, unable to sleep, Ivy dreamed of the basement again, of the circle of students, chanting and reaching for her, their hollow eyes promising that the dorm would not let her go. She awoke with a start to find a note slipped under her door. Curiosity has its price. You will return. Heart-hammering, she knew, with terrifying clarity, that no matter how far she tried to run, the dorm had already claimed a part of her, and that part would always be drawn back to the locked basement, to the students who were never truly gone. The Ivy who had entered that first night was gone. In her place was someone else, someone alert to every shadow, every whisper, every pulse of the dorm's dark heart. The dormitory stood silent outside, indifferent to the terror inside, yet alive, watching, waiting. And in the basement, the circle continued to chant, patiently, eternally, feeding on curiosity, on fear, on souls who thought they were merely moving in for college life, unaware that some doors, once opened, can never be closed. Story 3. Room 313. Alex had never been the type to believe in ghost stories, urban legends, or dormitory rumors. Yet, as he stood in front of room 313 on the third floor of Hawthorne Hall, a shiver ran down his spine that no autumn wind could explain. The door was plain, old wood with chipped paint, a number plate slightly askew, and yet something about it radiated a quiet menace. Every upperclassman he asked about the room had avoided eye contact, mumbled vague warnings, or laughed nervously, muttering things like, "Just don't stay too long," or "People don't like it there." Alex tried to shrug it off, telling himself it was just superstition. But the instant he turned the key and stepped inside, the air felt heavier, thicker, as if the room itself was breathing. He placed his bag on the narrow bed, noticing the faint smell of mildew and something he couldn't identify. Metallic, almost like iron, but warmer, alive. That first night, as he lay in bed, the darkness seemed to press against him, and faint whispers tickled the edges of his hearing, just low enough that he thought they were in his mind. He told himself he was imagining it, that dorm rooms always creak and sigh. Yet when he turned over, the shadows at the corners of the room seemed to stretch toward him, elongating unnaturally, as if curious, probing, aware of his presence. Over the next few days, small things began to unnerve him. His reflection in the scratched mirror lingered a moment too long when he moved. Books fell from the shelves without cause, and sometimes, when he thought he was alone, he could hear the soft shuffle of footsteps pacing across the floor. At first, Alex ignored it, blaming the building's age and the wind outside. But the incidents became more deliberate, precise. One evening while studying, he heard a whisper clearly call his name. Right behind him, he spun around. The room was empty. His heart raced, yet a strange fascination kept him rooted, eyes scanning every corner as if expecting the room to answer back. Sleep became a battleground. Every night, Alex dreamed of room 313 expanding, walls twisting, ceilings stretching impossibly high, doors opening to infinite darkness. Shadows moved with purpose, forming shapes vaguely human, staring at him with empty, knowing eyes. He awoke each time drenched in sweat, convinced that the room had entered his dreams and that he had entered the room itself. Determined to understand, Alex began researching the history of room 313. He discovered that over the past decades, students assigned there had either requested transfers or left school entirely, often without clear explanation. Some rumors suggested the room collects certain kinds of people, that it is alive, feeding on curiosity, fear, and hidden guilt. Alex dismissed it as legend, but when he found the old logbooks in the dorm office, each entry by previous occupants stopped abruptly, sentences cut mid-thought, handwriting jagged, and notes about strange noises, objects moving, and whispering walls. Alex felt a cold certainty settle in his chest. The room had a consciousness, and it was waiting for him. That night, he lay on his bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, and watched as shadows began to ripple across the walls. They formed shapes of students he vaguely recognized from yearbooks, all pale, silent, staring. His reflection appeared again in the mirror, but it was wrong. His eyes were hollow, and his smile was cruel. He reached toward it, and the reflection smiled back, mocking him, whispering secrets he did not want to hear, but could not ignore. As the days passed, Alex's grip on reality weakened. Objects shifted when he wasn't looking. The door sometimes refused to open, or opened to reveal parts of the dorm that did not exist. He heard chanting in the dead hours, low and guttural, filling the room with a vibration that made his teeth ache. One night, the whispers became voices, distinct, accusing, imploring. Stay, belong, never leave. Alex tried to flee, but the hallway beyond the door warped, twisting into impossible angles. He ran, but the walls seemed to stretch, the floor bending, shadows stretching toward him. A familiar face appeared at the edge of the hall, another student, but when he approached, it dissolved into smoke. His own voice echoed back at him, distorted, calling his name, repeating secrets he had never told anyone. Panic consumed him, yet a part of him was drawn deeper, toward the room, as if it had claimed him before he even realized. One night, he saw the outlines of figures sitting cross-legged in a circle in the center of the room, just as he had dreamed. Their faces blank, pale, their eyes empty hollows that bore into his soul. He wanted to scream, but no sound emerged. They whispered his fears, his regrets, his guilt, threading them into chants that made the room pulse with a life of its own. Alex tried to resist, tried to turn away, but the shadows stretched, wrapped around him, pulling him toward the circle. Each heartbeat felt as though it belonged to the room, not to him. He realized with horror that room 313 did not just trap people, it absorbed them, feeding on the essence of their fear and desire, shaping reality itself around their minds. Weeks passed. Alex was seen wandering the dorm in a daze, pale, muttering to himself. He tried to avoid the room, but each night the whispers found him, infiltrated his dreams, bled into his waking hours. The mirror in the hall reflected not his image, but the room itself, doors opening and closing, shadows shifting, a low hum vibrating from behind the walls. One evening, a note appeared on his desk. "The room is patient. You are already ours." Alex understood, in a way that chilled him to his core, that leaving was no longer a choice. Room 313 had claimed him. It had entered his mind, merged with his consciousness, and now, even when he was away, it was never silent, never still. The dorm continued as if nothing had changed. Students came and went, unaware of the subtle warping of reality, the shifting of walls, the whispers threading through ceilings and floors. And in room 313, shadows waited patiently, watching, knowing, hungering, for the next curious mind, brave or foolish enough to step inside and believe that it was only a dormitory room, unaware that some rooms never let go.